Okay. Sadie, would you mind going to the next slide? I know that other people will be trickling in. Okay, welcome to everybody. If you haven't heard me say that already, my name is Marilyn Sittiker, and I'm going to be facilitating today's Ideas Lab. Just to give you a few technical tips as we get started, please remain on mute for the main session. We will have a question and answer session, and at that point, we'll ask people to submit their questions through the chat function. There is live closed captioning available, and we are recording this session. I think you probably have already gotten a notice about that. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the CSA Innovation Network, and welcome to those of you who are joining our Ideas Lab for the first time. I'm then going to introduce our main speaker today, Annie Salafsky, who is the former owner of Helsing Junction Farms, CSA. We will have a facilitated discussion, question and answer. And after that, Sadie Willis is going to give us a little bit of information about the CSA renewals campaign materials. That was a challenge that was happening recently from the CSA Innovation Network. Then we're going to wrap things up and bid you all farewell. Okay, let's go on to the next one. First of all, let me tell you a little bit about the CSA Innovation Network purpose. We've been around since 2018. We just finished up 1 3-year USDA funded grant cycle, and we're working on our second one. So they like us at USDA, the Agricultural Marketing Service, which is where we are getting our funding from. And we are very happy to continue to serve in the role of connecting CSA farmers, technical assistance providers, and consumers with one another, and to resources that will help support a national movement toward stronger, more resilient, and equitable CSA programs. Next slide, please. Next slide, Sadie. There we go. Oh, I'm sorry, one back. So the kinds of things that we do is we provide educational programs like this one, as well as tools and resources and opportunities to engage that will help advance CSA farming by building awareness of the meaning and the value of community-supported agriculture. Okay, next slide. Just to give you an idea, we have partner organizations that are pretty much nationwide. They tend to be concentrated pretty heavily on the East Coast, the Midwestern region, and a few organizations that are on the West Coast as well. And next slide, you can see a copy of some of the logos from some of our CSA participating organizations. This will be available for folks if you want to look back a little bit later. But today, I would like to introduce our wonderful speaker, Annie Salafsky. Annie, with her partner, Sue Uchik, were both former owners of the Helsing Junction CSA farm. This farm started in 1993 with 5 acres and 75 members. By 2000, they had grown to over 1,000 members and kind of kept their CSA around that level for the next 30 years almost. By the time that they were at their peak and finishing up, they had over 50 acres that was feeding over 5,000 people each week through their CSA. So that's a pretty remarkable achievement. They had a very successful operation. And Annie is here today to share some of her insights about what it took to build such a successful business with a mindset toward making sure that the needs of the farming business were met while giving acceptable prices to the customers. I want to say that both Annie and her partner were Evergreen State College graduates. Annie participated in the farming program there. So just want to have a little bit of plug for Evergreen. Okay, so go ahead and take it away, Annie. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, I'm a huge fan of CSA, so I love to speak about it. When we started the business, we had, like Marilyn said, we had 75 members. We actually took over the business from my business partner's husband, who was taking a job at Evergreen, actually. So that's why we started with 75 members. And this is, in the 90s when CSAs were very unknown. And so it was kind of a rough go of it for a while, having to recruit members and explaining the entire concept from start to finish to people. So it was pretty challenging. But we had a good run of it for a few years. And then after a while, we realized, and at the same time, we were also wholesaling a few products and attending farmers markets in the area. We realized that we wanted to stop going to farmers market because they were on weekends and my business partner had young kids at the time. So we did the math and we realized we needed 100 CSA members more to stop going to market. So we got the members and quit market. And we realized that we really liked CSA because it just gave us a lot more freedom to shape our business the way we wanted to. There was a giant rule book involved with going to the farmers market that we kind of tired of. And so the CSA just let us use our imagination and really no limits. And a good illustration of this was one year we wanted to buy a new delivery truck and we didn't have the funds. And so we just dreamed up this idea of sustaining members. And that would be people that would join for 2 years at a time and pay in full. And then that was over Thanksgiving weekend. And we came back after that weekend and opened the mailbox and there was $10,000 in there. So it was like super exciting. And just really fueled our interest in CSA. So we grew slowly every year after that, mostly doing CSA. We also sold direct to a large chain of organic markets in the area, Fennel and Radicchio. And after a while, we were big enough, maybe around 500 members, and just crunching all the data ourselves using various software. We decided we needed some data management software. So we shopped around and we started using Farmigo. And that really helped us grow our business and take off. So by 2000, we had about over 1,100 members. We were still selling direct to the organic food markets and also to 2 home delivery services that had about 400 to 1,000 members. And then competition really started to increase at that point. Suddenly there was local food everywhere. It was from like, you could get supposedly local food at Target, as opposed to how it had been before, where you had to engage directly with a farm or at the market or via CSA to get local food. So we decided to expand experimented with different share sizes, add-ons. We added home delivery as well. We also started some agro-tourism endeavors. For 10 years, we had an annual music festival with K Records, which is a local record label, which was super fun. Then we had farm to table dinners too. And then in 2016, we started wholesaling again. And that, ironically, then, no, not ironically, directly, I think it was very difficult. And then we started trying to sell our business in 2017. Took a couple of years and sold it to 2 really cool women in 2019 after 28 years. And currently I'm working for WSU Extension. So it's been a nice path. So over the years, we have both undercharged for our shares and charged a more fair price for our shares. When we started farming, we are true of CSA in that everything we grew, we gave to our members. But that meant that we were giving a lot of food away. Actually, when we did the math, we realized at least $200 to $300 worth of extra produce per share, which in $1990 was quite a bit. And we had one size share, large shares, and no customization. And most members actually split shares with each other. And the main complaint we ever received was it was too much food, which was actually a much bigger issue than we realized at the time. But also because we were such a good deal, it did help us grow our business when nobody knew what a CSA was. So we could definitely say we were a very good value for the money. And we were sort of enthralled to the idea that food should be cheap, which, you know, probably isn't the most, I mean, there's a lot of value to that idea, but it's maybe not sustainable for farmers because food is actually already really cheap. And local food, you know, there's an idea that it's an elitist kind of, that, you know, trying to get people to eat local food is elitist, but in our opinion, that's just the way people have always eaten. It's only in the last 75 years that people haven't been eating local food. So we were really happy when the buy local movement gained steam. We felt in the, like, maybe 2005, I want to say, but you know, we felt like, oh wow, our ships come in. We had so many members. We're doing so good. And then suddenly local food was everywhere. And the competition really heated up. And so then this is when we started all our customization. So we thought of so many different shares. We had a mini share, a medium, a large, a paleo, a healing, a snack share, a flour share, a bulk share, a storage share, a fruit share, a yogurt share, a cheese share, and add-ons like meat, soap, grains, and beans. So we just made all these shares up. You know, I can explain more if anyone wants to know about any of them, but and then we used Farmigo to track what was in the boxes. And this helped us monitor the amount, the variety people were getting and print labels, and just helped us expand. Because we had 50 drop sites and we were delivering from Seattle to Portland and as far west as the coast. We had a pretty giant, like over 200 mile delivery route. And several years in a row, we grossed over $900,000. So we were doing really well at that time. But ironically, we were taking home maybe the same amount of money or even less than we had when we were smaller. We had more employees, more trucks on the road, more delivery days, and lots more work. We were spending more time and money on advertising, communication, building a new website, newsletters, customer service, and definitely not charging enough for our shares and not charging enough for products we bought. At first, we were only charging a 15 to 20% markup on resale goods, but then we realized industry standard was more like 40%. So then we raised those prices, and that turned out to be a really good source of income for us. But we were still struggling financially. And so we started experimenting with putting less in the boxes and raising the price of our shares. So we added a $5 to $8 a week box packing fee. So that meant like two to three less items per week in the box. And we raised the price of our shares $1 a week annually or biannually. And there was literally no pushback about any of that, which was shocking because we heard from people constantly and we heard about everything. If there was like a spot on a cauliflower, or, you know, we got a lot of feedback from people, which was both good and bad, but we really just heard no pushback about raising the prices or making the boxes smaller, which was, we were really shocked by, because we had argued a lot with each other about raising the prices. I was nervous about it. My business partner, who was handling more of the finances, was just really adamant that we had to do it. And she was completely right about that. So, and I mean, I think that, you know, it jives with the fact that the main complaint we received was too much food. And so since we always grew more than we needed as insurance, so that we would have enough to put in the boxes, we switched over to selling the extra we grew instead of giving it to the CSA members. And even in a bad year when we had a lot of crop loss and the boxes were even smaller still, we still had no complaints about the amount in the boxes. And we didn't, I think initially we had tried, like, you know, keeping people abreast of all the changes and being very transparent about it. And so, yeah, there was just no complaints. So one of the things that I think so amazing about CSAs and why they work is as a farmer, you can't control what prices are. Seem very arbitrary and not reflective of reality whatsoever. It's nice to see they're finally going up a little, but for many years they didn't. And when we started wholesaling in the 90s, some of the prices 15, 20 years down the line were actually lower than they had been in the 90s. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but you as a farmer don't really have control, and you have to somewhat approximate market value so that you can be of good value for people. So the way CSAs work is you are basically providing a wholesale product to your customers at a retail price. And so it's in that savings of labor where you are essentially getting a higher price for your product because you're keeping more of the money you make. And so we really tried to remember that and be really efficient about how we labored and try to minimally process produce, like not washing potatoes or, or not cleaning garlic very well, or, which we would explain to our customers and never seemed to be a big issue. So really the most successful iteration of our business was when we were only doing CSA. And we did the math. So every time our truck left the farm, it would have approximately $10,000 worth of produce on it. And so if you wanted to make $10,000 going to market, you would potentially need 5 to 10 trucks, 5 to 10 employees, as opposed to when our truck left the farm, it was one driver going and dropping off the $10,000 worth of produce in a day. So it was just really obvious that that was just a much more efficient way of selling our produce. Yes, and so then when we started putting less in the box and selling the excess, it kind of felt hard to do at first, but actually seemed like a better business model in the end. And then raising prices annually or biannually. And it's different now with the recession. I don't have experience in the last few years of that, but at the time that went unremarked upon. So that was really interesting. And we would track prices using a wholesale price sheet we got from a friend that worked at a wholesaler. So that was a good way to kind of keep abreast of what prices actually were. And then another thing we did, once we had spent the time and money getting the customers, we realized we wanted to sell more to the ones we already had and instead of trying to find more customers. So that was part of why we started offering other shares and other items via our CSA, and also expanded our season a couple of weeks on either end, just to increase revenue. I think the things that made our CSA successful, and it was really cool because we were one of the only women-owned CSAs that we knew of in our area. I mean, there was other women involved, many women involved in CSA, but just that we were 2 women farming together. And we didn't maybe always get the respect we possibly deserved. I don't know, it was weird. But anyway, so communication was really, I think, what made us successful, because we didn't go to market and we didn't have a storefront. We had to create the world for our members and share our story, which we did via weekly newsletters and recipes. We had a recipe database on our website where you could type in the name of any vegetable and it would pop up all the recipes. We had a vegetable glossary that explained the history of all the vegetables, had photos, and just gave you general ideas about how to use the vegetables. We had so many photos, social media posts, of course, really good customer service, very attentive customer service. We really tried to make the CSA shares a kit, made it as easy as possible for people to get through the vegetables each week, because that was one of the biggest impediments to keep retaining customers. And we spent a lot of time and money on advertising, which was pretty unique in this area, which is why a lot of local CSAs were more like 100 members, and why ours was 1,000, I think, because we had a big delivery area and we were doing a lot of advertising. We focused on our employees, paying fair wages, providing free food as much as wanted to all our employees. We focused on soil health, and we thought a lot about what we were growing and tried a lot of new things and interesting varieties and spent the money on good seed. We both love to cook and eat, and we got creative when faced with challenges, and we were always growing and changing. So that's my overview of the last 28 years.
Wow, thank you so much, Annie. Thank you. I'm going to invite folks to submit their questions in the chat, and I'll give you a couple minutes to kind of reflect on what you've heard. There are some folks who submitted some questions ahead of time, and there were several questions about really trying to figure out how to price your shares such that you can give a fair wage to your employees, and how much of your profits, like what percent do you spend on salary for employees? How do you budget that? And that's something that you reflected in your presentation, Annie. Do you have anything that you would like to add about that? About a general ballpark of, how do you make things balance out that you're paying fair labor costs as well as being able to keep the cost of your CSA reasonable for customers?
That was always a fine line to walk, but we really made it a priority to pay our employees well and above minimum wage always. And I think that was a good strategy because it really helped us retain employees. We had many people that worked for us for 10 years or longer. So if anything, it was us personally taking the hit financially more, which was, maybe not that sustainable in the long run, but that's sort of how things shook out, I would say.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Another thing that we heard about in the pre-questions were the role, how much to spend on advertising. And that's something that you said was a really key aspect of your success. Did it take you a while to grow your business before you felt like you really could put what was needed into your advertising and marketing budget?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we did a lot of just like in-person advertising and found ways to advertise that were free or cheap. We've tried everything for advertising. We went door to door in neighborhoods we delivered to. The internet, we had a flyer printed up that got put in the Seattle Weekly, which was like a local free newspaper. And we would do like runs of like 80,000 put in there. It was pretty expensive, but that worked better than anything else we had tried. I mean, people would be like, I found this on the bathroom floor and now I want to join. So they were just flooding the city. They were everywhere, which in hindsight is kind of gross, but I mean, it worked really well. But now, now the whole thing's different because it's so driven by social media. So yeah, but we had a whole very robust social media advertising campaign that we ran.
Okay, we're getting a lot of wonderful questions in the chat now. Let me see. Let me see if I can scroll through some of these. Someone was asking what was the best bang for the buck when doing the marketing and advertising. What do you think was, obviously you use multiple channels for marketing, but what do you think was the best investment of your money,
I
your
mean,
marketing money?
definitely having that insert in the Seattle Weekly, but I don't think that's
Mhm,
really relevant anymore in the same way that it was back then.
mhm,
And there really is no silver bullet when it comes to advertising, is what we found, that it's just more going to take like a whole, you need a whole like quiver of strategies,
mhm,
because there really isn't just like, if you do this, this will work. You just kind of chip away at it, I feel like. And really, truly, the best advertising was word of mouth, and um, to really ensuring that people had a good experience,
mhm.
felt connected to us, felt connected to the farm, and you know, would give their friends infomercials about our farm, which was like no advertising you could ever hope to buy. So
Mhm.
yeah.
So we had several questions in the registration, and I see a couple in the chat too that really kind of address how to deal with rising prices of food due to inflation and the recession, and how you balance that out. How do you balance out overall the need to do crop planning ahead of time, to make certain commitments ahead of time, and then dealing with some uncertainty in what happens when you're in the middle of a season? So there's that question. There's also a question of how do you explain this to your CSA members if you need to raise your prices? How do you negotiate that while keeping the prices attractive enough so that people will want to stick with you?
We did a lot of that by the seat of our pants. We were untrained, and it was just a lot of trial and error, honestly.
Hmm.
And yeah, I don't, it, like, now I wish we had been more, we just tried everything, and then whatever stuck to the wall is what we went with, I would say.
Hmm. Hmm. Folks were asking too about how do you balance out getting an upfront payment with the need for being a little bit more flexible and allowing installment payments or pay-as-you-go type payments?
We always took installment payments, but we had all the
Mhm,
different options. And
mhm.
one thing that's really, I think, important that we did via Farmigo is that we took e-checks, which the fees on
Ah,
them are a lot lower than the fees on credit cards. E-check fees are
ah,
like, 1 to 2%, and credit card are in like the 4 to 5%. So just right there, um, that's a good way of going about it. And we always had like a disclaimer saying if people wanted to come up with different payment plans, they just needed to contact us. And we definitely had people do that over the years. And we would have some people pay weekly, and Farmigo's pretty good too. That they have, and the thing we did too, which, I don't know the ethics of it, but have automatic payments, which was
mhm,
really good too, via Farmigo.
mhm.
And that just made it a very steady supply of income that you could count on coming in.
Okay. One of the ways that we met each other, Annie, was through a research project that I was doing on helping to make CSAs more affordable for low-income families, and that included allowing SNAP EBT payments in combination with a CSA subsidy that was provided by our research grant. Can you talk a little bit about that and other ways that you tried to make your CSA more affordable? Um, and I know we CSA Innovation Network had uh, an ideas lab on this very topic, and maybe Sadie can put a link to that in the chat. But anyway, Annie, can you talk a little bit about how to make things more affordable for low-income families?
Yeah, we were in a pioneering study trying to take SNAP and EBT for CSA shares. It was pretty complicated because you had to actually run the cards in person each week, which was
Yeah.
really challenging for our delivery staff. Um, but it was a good effort. And we always worked directly with the Thurston County gleaners who would come and harvest all our seconds. So each year annually, we would give over 10,000 pounds of produce away to in our community. So that was one thing we, tried to get food out to the people that needed it. And yeah, so, and we gave a lot of food away locally in our town too.
Mhm.
So.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Pink Moon Farm to unmute and ask their question.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, Annie, I was just typing that in the chat. Yeah, my question was around just how you set expectations for the number of boxes you would do in a year. Like if that was we could do 1,000, or 1,000 is really what is going to get us to a profitability level that we feel good about. And then kind of a second question to that, what would happen if you couldn't meet that goal?
Yeah, we started like, I guess we wanted 1,000 members. That was our goal. And we met it most years, but it was kind of a struggle. And then we did have some years where we didn't. And that's where having these other outlets that we could sell to came in really handy. So the home delivery service, which had approximately the same amount of members that our CSA had. So we could, instead of, we were going to have extra whatever, we would just turn and sell it to them. So it was a good like relief valve, because it is really challenging with CSA having to get the members every year. You're sort of back at square one each and every year. So we also really aim to try to retain members. We worked really hard on that. But we probably never got beyond like 60%. But that's higher than the national average, I guess. It's under 50, but it was definitely really challenging. And then once expenses mounted and we had staff and we had equipment we had purchased, we had a lot of pressure to try to make those numbers. And it was really stressful, actually, and something I don't miss. So I get that is really, really hard.
I'm going to ask Evan Driscoll to unmute and ask his question about determining what to grow and what to buy in and resell.
Sure. Thanks so much. And thanks so much, Annie and Marilyn, for putting this together. Yeah, just wondering about like in figuring out which products to buy in and resell and which products to grow yourself, and also sort of your methodologies around product costing particularly for the crops that you're growing in the field, and determining which crops are going to be most profitable or which crops are going to be a loss leader for you in your CSA box, kind of tying the production side of things to the profitability side of things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Wait, what was the first part of your question? I'm so sorry.
Determining what to buy in and resell and what to grow.
Right, yes.
And then also with what you're growing, how are you determining which crops are profitable and figuring that out?
So when we started, we were definitely growing everything that was going out the door. But we're in the maritime climate, so we definitely have more issues growing like tomatoes or hot weather loving crops. And so we would experiment with lots of different things. We for some years we didn't grow tomatoes at all. And it was okay. And then other years we did grow tomatoes. And then one year we decided we're going to buy tomatoes from Eastern Washington. And that seemed to be okay too. I don't know. I think if it's something that people really like and it's something you struggle with growing, crunching the numbers on it to see how profitable or not it is I think a good thing. And I don't think you have to do that for all crops. Obviously some that are in the ground for a short amount of time that are really easy to harvest and process, like lettuce, it fills up a box really nicely. We sort of tried to focus on those things. And it was strange. The things that we thought were really going to bother people didn't. I mean, I think people were kind of attached to the idea that we were growing everything, but then not really, it didn't really have any real world ramifications when we bought things either. And especially because we would buy them from other farms, small local farms, not just like a wholesaler or something. So and a lot of it was like anything that you could explain and be transparent about, you could not like get away with, but people would accept, like if they had the why of it, it went a long way for them to get on board, it made them get on board with you. And since, we had really communicated clearly like who we were, who was growing their food, that people had a pretty strong connection to us. And so I think it allowed us to make decisions that might have been, more difficult if they hadn't known us as well as they did. And we didn't do a lot of like tracking what it costs to grow things, which maybe we should have. But yeah, I mean, we just tried to grow a really big variety because it seemed like that's what people really liked about our CSA. And something we did in the end was we'd grow 7 kinds of peppers, and then using Farmigo, we could track each week what variety different size shares had gotten. And so we would try not to repeat, so that, okay, they had gotten peppers 7 weeks in a row, but it was 7 different varieties of peppers, that you could work in a lot of variety even without actually growing that many different crops per se. So that was a strategy we used.
I think we have a question from Steve next. Steve, can you unmute?
Sure, thanks. At the beginning of the Q&A, Annie, you talked a little bit about the compensation that you gave to staff and your own sort of compensation. I was just hoping you could speak to that a bit more. It sounds like you were paying staff enough that they stayed around 10 years and beyond, but that maybe you weren't compensating yourself well enough. So I'm just curious if you could speak more to that on sort of the pay range within, your team, and also what you were able to take for yourself as, in the context of farm profitability and viability, compensation is always a big part of the picture, and certainly one of our biggest costs on our farm.
Yeah. I mean, we just, again, were very, very, lackadaisical about that. Like we just knew we wanted to pay ourselves well, and we managed to pay ourselves decently. I mean, we'd make $50,000 a year each, which for farming part-time was reasonable, really reasonable and pretty good. But we struggled financially, definitely. It felt like we were just always running around with a leaky bucket trying to plug all the holes. We got into a bad cycle where we took early bird members, but then we would spend some of that money, in the fall when it really was supposed to be for the next year. So we really struggled with that. And then we got in the cycle where we had to take the early bird members, and then with the sustaining members that I was talking about before, we would use that money instead of using it for infrastructure. We would use it on salaries or something like that. So that was definitely a challenge, and sort of, I feel like, what drove us out of business eventually, or wanting to sell the business, because the stress of that was really intense. So I don't really have a good answer about that. It's really important. But yeah, staying in budget is really hard when you have so many, things that you want to do, and you just can't not. Well, I mean, you can, but we didn't want to pay our employees poorly, and we wanted them to stay, and felt like that was worth the money ultimately. So yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Emily to ask her question, and then Pink Moon had another question as well. Emily?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. So I'm looking to drop market after 16 years of doing it. And I'm really nervous to do so because a lot of our market customers are actually CSA members. And so I'm afraid that it's going to take away from their experience as CSA members. Like they'll get a box every other week and supplement with coming to market. And I'm just wondering if you had any reservations about when you dropped market, and specifically if as it relates to like the CSA program that you run, and just making sure that your customers are happy with the choices. I mean, I'm just really nervous about dropping market.
It was really challenging, but really liberating to drop it. And it was sort of like the flame that under our, that kept us running because we were like, we can't go back to market. So we just had to get the members, and it just, really drove our advertising and drove us to, make the CSA a success. And I mean, we were really burnt out on market, so we were really motivated not to go anymore. We didn't, and I mean, I think the part about like creating that sense of community with pictures and words for people in lieu of having that market presence was actually pretty successful in a way. And I think when, still wove our community together and gave it a lot of strength.
Okay. Jordan had a question, and if we have time, I think Pink Moon also has another comment. But we're coming to the close of our session here, so I want to give Jordan a chance to get his question in. Go ahead and unmute, Jordan.
Hi. We have a CSA much smaller than yours, and it's all pickup based. So instead of a delivery, I'm just wondering about raising prices for some of our members that have been with us for a really long time and offering less food. They would definitely notice a higher price and a smaller portion. Do you have any suggestions about how to make that change where we can be more profitable by offering less and charging more?
I would just be really transparent about it and get them on board. I mean, that's what we would do, just really like write about it in depth in our newsletter and explain to people like the nuts and bolts of why it was happening, what our plan was, like before we even implemented it, just preparing people to hear the information. And it felt like people were really empathetic, once they understood why they would get it and they would support you, and especially if you have a long-term history with them. I mean, at least trying to take that route, I think, is important because, you can't just keep doing what you're doing when prices are going up. That's not fair to you. That's not fair to your staff. That's not sustainable in the long run, So just trying to like walk that line is really important. And just, I think, explaining to people. I mean, do you have a newsletter? I think that would, I think that's a good way to go.
Okay, I'm going to let Pink Moon go ahead and ask their next question. And then we're going to turn it over to Sadie, who has a couple of comments to make about our Early Bird Challenge campaign. Go ahead, Pink Moon.
Yeah, I just had a question. It sounded like, and I know this is true for a lot of us, that relationship building is super important for a CSA model. And you mentioned a newsletter and sort of a recipe library, but I was just wondering if you had any other examples of things that you started to do or things that seemed really effective in building relationships with members.
We also had an open house annually, which was a lot more complicated at first when we started it. We would like make food for our members. We'd have this big farm tour and all this stuff. And after a while, we were like, we hate doing that. We don't want to do it anymore. And so then we switched to like just an open house where they could like come and visit. But that definitely, people really looked forward to that and loved that. And then, you know, having the farm to table dinners and the music fest, a lot of members would come to that. That was really, really successful. And good publicity, you know, just definitely spread our name around a bunch more. Yeah. And then the Tumblr page, like our vegetable glossary that, you know, had some traction back in the day. And, you know, just social media, just trying to post really regularly, twice a week at the same time each week, you know, just being really consistent about it. Definitely seemed to keep us in the forefront of people's minds. And we sent out a lot of newsletters during the winter weekly to just recruit and get members to join and things like that. So
Okay, I am going to close our Q&A session, and my deepest apologies if I missed your question and didn't give you a chance to ask. But I want to turn it over to Sadie in order to provide you with some information that you might find really useful. But before I do, I want to really give a big thanks to Annie. I think you've provided us with a wonderful wealth of experience, and we're so grateful that you were able to come and share your knowledge and experience with the group. Thanks.
thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Sadie, take it away.
All right, thank you, Marilyn, and thanks again, Annie, too. I've put Annie's contact information up on the screen, so if you do want to reach out, you can contact her there. But like Marilyn said, I'm going to close this out here. I'm the network coordinator for the CSA Innovation Network. I work for Fair Share CSA Coalition here in Madison, Wisconsin. But if you're connected with the network at all, either through email, social media, that might be how you ended up in the Ideas Lab today. You probably also saw last month our Early Bird Challenge, which was a way to drum up support around CSA renewals, increasing retention of your membership. We thought it would be a good fit to tie in with Annie's talk today because it really is at the core of it about helping you start out the next season ahead, not back at square one necessarily. If you are able to get some of your members to renew, stay on board with your CSA farm, and also have thought about pricing and what you want that next season to look like for your farm to stay sustainable. So I'm just going to walk through a quick summary of some of the materials, and if you do want to receive them all in a nice bundled package, you can sign up. I'll make sure to send the link for that through the chat. You can also find it on our network's website. So this is just an overview, not going to dive in too deeply to the content here, but just to pique your interest, hopefully a little bit, and show you how it could be valuable to get the resources that we put together for the challenge, even though we're past the time period that we were running the hashtag challenge on social media. We put together 3 videos. They covered different components of setting up a successful renewals campaign. So the first step is thinking deeply about how you want to set the dates for keeping your CSA signups open for your existing members before you open it to the public or new members ahead of another season. So there are some considerations there. Second, we had Corinna Bench of My Digital Farmer do the second video. Corinna is a CSA farmer herself as well, and she has really good, solid ideas on how to build an offer that gets people to sign back up, but that still is bringing in money for your farm, and that's not setting yourself behind, even while it's incentivizing people to stay joined in your CSA for another season. And then finally, we worked with Trisha from Taste the Local Difference, which is a marketing food-based marketing firm in Michigan, to talk about what should go into your campaign. So she has a lot of really great tips and exercises to work through as you are actually setting up what you're going to send to your members. Beyond the videos, which are really great and informative, it's a real hands-on way to work through the steps of setting up your renewals campaign, we did create a few materials that are customizable for you to plug and play your own farm's information, hopefully helping you again not start at square one when you are trying to get people to sign up. There's the flyer template, which this is just a preview on the slideshow, but if you sign up for the early bird materials, you'll get the full document that you can plug your CSA's information into. You can hand it out in boxes or at markets or any other places that you're seeing or handing off physical items to your CSA members. Otherwise, you can always like crop it down to the one flyer size and still use it in email or over social media. So it's a fun way to engage and have that visual connection and build community with your CSA members. Finally, we've got an additional set of resources that is copy. This is just a very short snippet screenshots of a couple taglines that you can use as you are looking to get your members to sign up again. But we have a whole document that's full of language that you can just copy and paste into social posts, into your email, or any of the types of outreach that you're doing. So trying to just do some of that work for you and build community around CSA all across the nation. We also did want to remind folks that we do have a past CSA Ideas Lab. This was back from 2020. That was also sort of a workshop around setting up early bird CSA signups. Corinna, again, that I mentioned earlier from My Digital Farmer, was the main speaker at that webinar, and she walked through a short form set of recommendations of pricing and other considerations that go into making a financially successful early bird drive for your CSA farm. So you can watch that Ideas Lab as another resource in this arena. And finally, like I mentioned, I'm going to drop this sign up link into the chat. So even though the challenge itself was running in November, anyone who signs up today will get funneled into our outreach mechanism, and you'll get all of the videos and other resources sent to you over the next week or so after you sign up. So feel free to dive into those resources after signing up for our renewals campaign materials, and we really hope that will be helpful to just holistically provide you with some marketing materials in everyone's shared goal of having a successful CSA, just like Annie was talking about. All right. And then just to wrap up our call here today, we do still have a few minutes left, so I'll walk through quickly these last couple of notes that we want to pass along from the network. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for facilitating, and Annie for sharing your wonderful knowledge, and everyone else who chimed in with your own experiences and questions. We will be sharing the slideshow and the recording of this call in a follow-up email to everyone who registered. Now, I also know there are people who weren't able to make it live. So those folks will still be able to absorb this information later. We will post any resources that come up into the resource library, which is on our Innovation Network's website. I'm posting that in the chat as well. And if you, don't keep a close eye on your inbox too often, but you're thinking about copying back to this recording at any time in the future, you can also find it up on our YouTube channel, which is, again, also linked from the website. So anything that you need in regards to resources or finding this webinar again, you can head over to the Innovation Network's website and find it there. Otherwise, we do have a session evaluation. This is one thing that we really value. I just put the link into the chat. It will also go out in the follow-up email and can also be accessed through these slides when they're sent out. But we take the input that you all send us very seriously in terms of if the Ideas Lab is helpful, what we can improve upon, what you liked. So please click that link and type away. It's a very short survey, but it does have room for comments. If you want to send us any notes about today's presentation, we would greatly appreciate it. And we will have another CSA Ideas Lab coming up in the new year. There's a few topics being floated right now in the network. So we're working on pinning down the schedule and the topic for our next CSA Ideas Lab, but we'll be sure to keep you all in the loop via social media. You can follow the CSA Innovation Network across Instagram and Facebook, or just by being on our email list, which is available for sign up on the website. And that is all we had for you today. I can stay on the line for a couple more minutes. Maybe Annie and Marilyn can too, if folks had a couple last minute questions. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciated the conversation today.